What's up, BookTube? It's Lady Cooper here, and today I'm bringing you a very belated review of Dreadful Young Ladies and Other Stories by Kelly Barnhill. This is a fantastical short story collection published by Algonquin Books. It came out on February 20th, and I am 2 months late doing this review. Whoops. I received an advanced reader's copy of this book via NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. So all of my thoughts and opinions in this video are my own. I'm not being paid to do this or whatever. You know the drill. So I am really behind on both reading and reviewing arcs. I'm just not reading super quickly, and I requested a bunch of arcs for books that all kind of came out semi-close together, so I'm super late. And that is not a reflection on any of the books that I'm reading. So I spent about a month reading Dreadful Young Ladies, and then I've kind of been allowing myself to ruminate on it, think about it, and also kind of like give myself some time, because one of the things with short story collections, I think, is a lot of times the stories can be sort of unmemorable, or they kind of blur together. And so I think a really good test of a short story is giving yourself a little space and then reflecting back on it and seeing what stuck with you. And then also, I just haven't been making a whole ton of BookTube videos. And to be honest, I feel really sick today, but this review is already so late, I didn't want to leave it any longer. So I'm gonna forge ahead and try to talk about it because, you know, I really liked this short story collection. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. That's maybe like a round up. Not necessarily every short story in this collection is a 5-star read, but you know, several of them were. And I would say the most of the rest of the stories were 4 stars. Like, looking back, there's no story in that collection that pings in my memory as a 3-star, like something that was just kind of like I had to read it to get to the next one, because I do like to read short story collections in order, unless it's like a multi-author collection, then I'm a little less fussed about doing that. Sometimes I'll skip around if I'm struggling with a story, which has definitely happened with some collections, but that never happened, and so like I feel really comfortable giving it such a high rating. And I also feel like it's a very good collection to recommend to people. Like, right off the bat, I would totally recommend this collection to a fairly wide audience. But let's talk about the collection before I get too far ahead of myself. From the Goodreads description, from Kelly Barnhill comes a stunning collection of stories teeming with uncanny characters whose lives unfold in worlds at once strikingly human and eerily original. And it's totally true. This collection as a whole is very much a fantastical collection, or a fabulous collection. There are a lot of magical elements, both interwoven into, like the description says, settings and characters that seem to exist both in our reality, in alternate realities, in fantastical realities. It spans the gamut, stretching the borders of imagination kind of between magical realism in some stories and almost folklore in other stories, to even fantastical dystopians in other. But there is definitely a core theme of something magical happening in each of these stories, which I love. These are the kinds of tales, because they really are tales. They're almost fabulesque at times, that I really love and appreciate in a collection. So as a lot of you will know, a couple of months ago, actually in February as well, I read The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night by Jen Campbell. This is her short story collection that's supposed to be inspired by, it's not fairy tale retellings, but it is supposed to be in some regards inspired by fairy tales. And while I did give this a 4-star review in my wrap up where I talked about this, I did say that it was a bit of a letdown, to be honest. I thought it was going to be weirder than it was. Like, this book is very just contemporary short stories. There's not a whole lot of weird going on here, except in the very first story, which is also the most memorable story. Dreadful Young Ladies and Other Tales is what I wanted from this. Like, just straight up. And that probably contributed to why I enjoyed reading it and why I kind of took my time reading it, savoring the stories the way that I did. Because after this book being really kind of typical of literary fiction, I thought Dreadful Young Ladies was refreshing and weird in the ways that I wanted a fantastical, semi fairy tale inspired short story collection to be. And that is not to detract from liking this book. I like this book, but to be honest, I like Dreadful Young Ladies a lot more. It's way more to my taste. It's way more what I wanted from a short story collection. I think from the title, you might almost be led to believe that it might be a little bit too moralizing, considering there's this dreadful young ladies, but it's very much not. None of the stories are really like Aesop in nature. They're not like trying to teach lessons. They're not trying to impart moral objectivity or anything like that. They're just exploring really interesting characters and really creative communities and riffing on different female motifs as well as fantastical fairy tale element motifs as well. The other great thing about Dreadful Young Ladies is that Kelly Barnhill's writing is beautiful and it so perfectly fits the collection. The tone throughout the collection is very cohesive. While the stories do not interconnect, they do seem to flow one into the other while being very much individual stories. They all have a very specific voice of the author, and that voice is very like polished and engaging without ever being distracting, lends to enhancing details instead of detracting from them. I'm very much interested in reading more by Kelly Barnhill because she's definitely a very good writer. There's something about her writing that reminded me a little bit of Catherine Arden. It's more poetic than that. It's maybe somewhere between Valente on a very low-key day and Catherine Arden at her most magical, like the most magical scenes with Morozco in The Bear and the Nightingale. It's somewhere in between that, somewhere in between The Orphan's Tales and The Bear and the Nightingale in some regards. It's probably, it's like if anyone reads this, they're going to be like, that's probably a really weird comparison. But I feel like if you like stories that fall somewhere in that gamut, and you really love speculative fiction and you love fantasy that kind of stretches the boundaries of fantasy into, dipping its toes into sort of urban settings. The opening story in Dreadful Young Ladies being about a widow who falls in love with a Sasquatch, for instance, in a small town, presumably in the Pacific Northwest, though it's been 2 months since I read that one, so I'm not entirely sure on that detail, to, fantastical future dystopians where there's a dictator obsessed with a comet that swings by the earth every quarter century and creates magic children. So if you really like those, very speculative elements, disparate speculative elements that still are so clearly written by the same person from the same creative genius, maybe that's a little grandiose way of putting it, but I think this collection's just really, really solid and fantastic. And I think if you're looking for a short story collection, this is definitely one to try out because I don't think you'll be disappointed by any of the individual stories. I think if you like Catherine and Valente's The Bread We Eat in Dreams, this is definitely a collection you will like. There are certain parallels I think you could tie between portions of The Bread We Eat in Dreams. The Bread We Eat in Dreams is a much larger collection. There's just a lot more in it, and it is a little bit more wildly diverse. Which that's another short story collection I totally recommend to people. But so if you've read that, or if you've read any of the stories from that, like the first title about Coyote, you would definitely like Dreadful Young Ladies. I mean, I hate to say it, but if you too were kind of disappointed by how not weird or strange this collection was, try Dreadful Young Ladies because it's just a lot weirder. Or if you liked animals from this collection, try Dreadful Young Ladies because Animals is the weirdest, like I said, it's the weirdest story in this collection. It's the most like fantastical one. It does kind of have similar tone as all of the stories in Dreadful Young Ladies. I think that's all I have to say about it. I didn't plan this review, I didn't write out a bunch of notes for myself. I just kind of sat down and started talking about it. Basically, this gets 2 thumbs up from me. I really liked it. Thank you, Algonquin Books, for approving me for an ARC. I certainly enjoyed reading it. Yeah, more reviews coming soon. Thanks for stopping by and watching this little review. I hope it's been helpful. I hope you check out this book. Let me know down below if you've read it or if you're thinking about picking it up. As always, if you aren't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in my next review, which should be for a couple of Tor.com novellas that I read for BookTube SFF. So look out for that. Anyways, see you guys.